Okay, I think we should start. And I'm Margaret Brodkin. I'm going to open this up and then turn it over to Salim Zymet. But before I do, I want to tell you who I am, the director of Funding the Next Generation, which is 5 years old now. And it was set up to help local coalitions get dedicated local dollars for kids, either through the ballot or through their local budget process. And we, hope to inspire coalitions all over the state to start working on this. And we're particularly interested in how you can do that now with the pandemic, and have had a number of webinars on that. And I will send everybody who is on this call tapes of our various webinars, and we try to inspire and provide technical assistance to people. And just to be specific, I love hearing from people, and my job is to help you think through this stuff, to help you just, do you have a question like, is a ballot measure possible in our city or in our county? Or do you have ideas about how to work through the local budget process? And I can see we're joined by Ed Harrington, who is one of our partners in this, and he just waved, and who helps people. He's the former controller of San Francisco, and he helps people analyze their local budgets and figure out where money might be reallocated or where there's opportunities to get new funding streams. So we're excited to be doing this series of webinars, and I want people to feel like they can call on us. And you can always email me, margaret@fundingthenextgeneration.org, and I'll show that again at the end. So I want to get started by introducing our wonderful speaker, Salim Zymet. And there's this picture. He's also there in person. And I have only just gotten to know him in the last couple of months, and I have to tell you, he's taught me a huge amount. So I'm excited that you're going to share his expertise, and we can talk afterwards about how you might get some individual help from him beyond this webinar. So, I mean, he's been doing this digital stuff for 10 years. And he's been doing email marketing, nonprofit consulting, political consulting. He is steeped in the digital world and helping people win elections and mobilizing supporters and winning support for many causes and passing legislation and developing online strategies and tools. He worked for Hillary during her campaign. He actually was the digital director for 4 different states, I think. And he was the marketing and engagement director for CrowdPack, which helps progressive candidates run for office. So he is the perfect person to be doing this for people who want to get more money for kids in their local budgets, and people who want to get ballot measures passed in their cities or counties. Salim, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Margaret, and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for hopping on to this digital event to talk about digital strategies and tools that we can use to advocate for kids in the age of COVID. Now, I will just start off by saying that digital is a $100+ billion industry. It is, at this point, almost everything. It encompasses all aspects of our life. It is even more invasive than ever in the age of COVID. And as such, there's no way I could talk through all of it in even a day-long session with you all. So the focus of this is really on what you can take and turn into action immediately to advocate for kids on a shoestring budget. So I'm trying to score quick wins here and give you some immediate tools you can use to advocate, regardless of what your objective may be. Because some folks maybe are working on a ballot measure, or others are just trying to grow their organization or prepare for 2021, raise money. There's so many different goals. We'll talk through as much as we can the broad strokes of all that. And I'm really looking forward to digging in further. So here's the things we're going to discuss. We already did introductions. I'm going to talk a bit about capacity considerations and how much human manpower or woman power or gender neutral power goes into all the digital work that needs to happen. There's so much. We're going to talk about Action Network in particular as a super powerful tool that's free or super cheap to power this work. We're going to talk really briefly about Google and Facebook advertising. We're going to talk about something you may have seen as it relates to Black Lives Matter recently, which is one-click email tools, which are really easy to deploy and very effective. Talk about Instagram tools in particular, as more and more people are getting their activism content from Instagram since Black Lives Matter. We're going to talk about Canva for making pretty graphics. We're going to talk about free photography resources, and then I'll just connect you to a couple other resources that might be helpful, and then I'm really excited to dig in the Q&A piece. So expect like 25 to 35 minutes and of presentation, and then plenty of time for Q&A, with a note that you should just use the chat this whole time. Talk to each other, make comments about what I'm saying, stop me. I'm looking at the chat and moving the presentation forward, so we can have a dialogue, and this doesn't have to be a one-way street of me just talking at you the whole time. Definitely use the chat, and I'm happy to kind of veer off a little bit to address things. And definitely for those who joined after we did this already once, please share where you're from in the state of California and what you'd love to get out of digital and what organization you represent, if you haven't already. Okay, let's dig in a bit. So I'm going to skip this slide since Margaret did such an amazing job introducing me, but it's important that for me that you know I love mac and cheese with all my heart. It's my favorite food and brings me a lot of joy. Okay, more importantly, here's why digital matters in case it wasn't super clear in the age of COVID. If anybody in the chat wants to like share what they think these three numbers might be referring to, I'd love to see it. Anybody have any ideas? I'll give the chat like 10 seconds to respond, and then I'll just share what these are. Little surprise pop quiz. Okay, 95% is the open rate of a text message, which is how we all communicate now, on text or Facebook Messenger or Instagram direct message, whatever it might be. And really important that all of us think about that and think about how much people are opening the emails we send them, which hovers around 20%. So texting is something to think about. Nia did take on to answer it. Nia, super close. It's not hours on social media, which would be like, if we've spent 7 hours on social media, then it'd be like, what? Then we didn't do any of our job. But it's 7 hours that the average American is connected to an internet device and looking at it. So obviously for people like me who work on a computer all day, my number's way higher. But even folks who work in industries that aren't tied to a computer, they are, on average, the average American is spending that much time looking at their Roku or on their phone or at work on their computer. Very close, Nia. Thank you. And then 130 billion is how much money is estimated will be spent on digital advertising this year, which is more than TV advertising and print advertising and radio advertising combined. And the reason for that is everybody's spending their time online, right? People are not watching 6 hours of TV a day, but they are spending that much time on their phones and computers. So it really matters that we meet people where they are, whether they're voters or donors or potential volunteers. Now, with all that, hopefully you agree that this is like the most critical thing to get right in 2020. It's so hard to do. There's so many elements to it. So I can't go through everything like I said, but there are a couple key things I want to leave you with. The first is that there's one coin in digital with two sides, content and distribution. BuzzFeed is the perfect example of this. They used the content of pet quizzes and the dress meme and going viral with all this animal content to fuel a website that also had news. And they built a distribution channel that through like all those cat memes. And then they had the content for that, but they also had content around like hard-hitting journalism. And they were super successful. They were like the media company. And then they relied a bit too much on Facebook and Facebook's distribution platform. and they had to lay off a bunch of their journalistic staff because they couldn't make the economic model work. And I only bring that up because so often in politics and in this nonprofit space, we will spend so long on making the perfect video or writing the right words. And I'm not trying to tell you that's not important. But if you don't spend an equal amount of time thinking through who's going to read those words and how they're going to get their hands on your content, and through what channels, you're doing yourself a disservice. Because you truly could tomorrow make the greatest film of all time. And if you don't distribute it to the right people and get it in front of the right folks, nobody will know. And that's a cardinal sin in digital. So 50% of your time should be spent on the content, and 50% of your time should be spent thinking through how to distribute it, is a good rule of thumb. I know it's hard to stick to because everybody wants to think about the words and images. Oops. And it's also just worth saying that, you know, this is a huge industry. I have a team. I'm paid to do this. You may not have that. You probably don't. So I have geared this towards quick wins you can score. But it is also true that there is like only so much you can accomplish without committing somebody full-time to running a digital program. You can't run the best email program and social media channels and put out nice videos and graphics and run advertising and build your list and raise money through one person. It's just not feasible. Like one person can do a lot of those things and some of them really well, but they can't do all of them well. And that's just a reality of 2020 with the complexity of running effective social media or email campaigns. So I challenge you to think about how to prioritize this and what elements you should prioritize. Maybe it doesn't make sense for your organization to start an Instagram handle because you don't need to reach young people. And really your focus is on the parents, in which case you should probably prioritize email and Facebook, maybe a Facebook group. But whatever the case, it's just important to prioritize what will be most impactful to the goals you and your organization have, and to think through who can staff it. Okay, with that, I'm going to talk through what I think are some of the most important things. Email, despite having low open rates, is still the primary method through which volunteers and donors decide to do things for us. Joe Biden just, released huge fundraising numbers, and probably 70 to 80% of that number came from email fundraising. So I'm going to talk through Action Network, which is a powerful tool to send emails to people and collect petition signatures and do a bunch of other things. And it's a tool that you can start for free. Many of you are probably familiar with MailChimp. Action Network is the political / nonprofit equivalent that is super cheap / free. So here's an example of an email that Jim, who is on this call, sent in Action Network. And in it, he did a couple of really smart things by putting out a public goal and asking people to own a piece of getting to that 1,000-person goal, and he included a link to the petition to get there, all of which happened through Action Network. He sent the email through Action Network. He had a list of people through Action Network that he generated by asking people to sign up and sign the petition. Action Network recently released texting technology that is also pretty cheap for nonprofits, and they currently have the cheapest way for you to text your supporters that I know of on the market, so I'd encourage you to look into it. So let's dig into it a bit more. This is what a page of a petition can actually look like. For those of you following the Movement for Black Lives, this is their Breathe Act, which they unveiled and want to introduce into Congress. And it's an example of a petition. And your Action Network petitions could look really similar. And this is a really good vehicle to build your email lists, which for most of the folks on this call is probably going to be the primary thing you want to build, because on email, you own that relationship. And you know that if you hit send on an email, it's going to end up in their inbox, unless you do a bunch of spammy stuff or they unsubscribe. It will end up in their inbox. And when you post on social media, you don't know if you're ever going to have your content seen by them, because Twitter and Facebook and Instagram control those algorithms. So you own that content, and you own the distribution channel through email, and it's why a lot of this is focused on building your email list. So here's a page just to show you Action Network's pricing and features. I encourage you to dig into it further if you don't currently have an easy way to email your supporters and get them to take actions and sign up for events and things. Action Network does it all for super free. And one thing that you should really think about when you're setting up your email program and Action Network is, what is a ladder engagement you want your organization to prioritize? Does anybody want to take a stab in the chat and share with the group what the ladder engagement might be, if you know, or what it sounds like? I will give it 10 seconds. And in the meantime, you can enjoy this cute GIF of a panda. Thank you, Nia, for being our reliable participant in my pop quizzes. Kind of degrees of separation. But it's, let's go through it since no one else stepped up. Thank you, Nia, for stepping up. This is our ladder. And it's basically a way of envisioning what you want people to do to help accomplish your organization's goals. So at the first rung of the ladder, I literally just learned about the, I'm trying to remember the name of the organization that I learned it for the first time by somebody from the chat. I think it was the Cambodian family, something like that. Apologies. Yeah, the Cambodian family. Welcome to the call. I Googled you, and now I'm officially an observer of the Cambodian family. I've heard of it, and that's it. I don't know what you guys do, and I haven't taken any action. I don't know what you want me to do, but I hope that you put some thought into what that is, because then your social media content can weave in the next rung of the ladder, which is easy things to do. Share this video, or like my page, or read this article. That's easy content. That's on the first rung of the ladder. Second rung of the ladder is way harder. It's like, okay, I need you now. You know us. You know we do good stuff. I need you to take an action. I need you to donate. I need you to volunteer. Then I take even more harder actions. I sign up to contribute monthly, or I sign up to join a 2-hour training, a webinar. And then eventually I'm like the biggest fan of the Cambodian family in the universe. I tell all my friends and family I'm an evangelist. Every organization's ladder of engagement is super different and should be. And I highly encourage you to think through what yours should be. And if you haven't, or if you have already, I encourage you to take it to the even next level and to think through a matrix of engagement, because there are probably people out there who, the second they hear about your mission, are going to be ready to give you $1,000 and tell all their friends and do everything you could possibly ask them to. And there are other people who will never move through this ladder because they're too busy. And you need to account for all types of people and all types of actions that can support your work. So ladder of engagement is the first way to think about it and the easier way to think about it, but the more complex, true to life way to think about it is the matrix of engagement. And you can Google that. A good friend and digital strategist named Brad Schenk wrote a book called The Digital Plan and included the matrix of engagement in it. Yeah, so Jim just put in the chat a really smart insight, which is that one simple thing you can do is see who's engaged and who's opening your emails. And if you're using a MailChimp or Action Network or Constant Contact, you can look up any person and see their history of opening and clicking on your emails. And then you can create a list of people who just haven't done that, and you can call them and be like, hey, why aren't you opening my emails? And try to move them up the ladder, if that's the ladder that matters, if you need them to read your emails. Okay. So assuming you do want people to read your emails and you need to build up that email list, you need to build it. And there's so many different ways. Here's an example of the splash page we built for Margaret with a beautiful poster to get folks to add their name to join Funding Next Generation broadly. This is pretty simple, but worth reiterating that you can ask people to join you via social media, through email, through texting them, and through advertising. But there's like a ton of different options you have, and the key thing that when it comes to list building is what value are you providing to a person. So like Margaret at the top of this call told you exactly what her value to you is. Not sorry to put it in such capitalistic terms, but for an internet user, that's what they're scrolling real fast on their thumbs, and you have to really have your value proposition front and center for them to be like, oh, I do want to stop and take a second to dig deeper on what they're talking about. So whatever channel you're promoting, whether you want them to join your email list or follow you on social media or whatever, you need to have the value proposition of your organization front and center in all of that. One way to get front and center in front of people is through advertising. So I would love people to post in the chat who has any experience placing any ads, and what sort of experiences they had. Especially, I assume some folks on here have placed a Facebook ad in the past. Maybe they've boosted a post or something like that. And I'll keep moving on as folks hopefully weigh in on the chat. But these, both Facebook and Google, Facebook is weighing banning political ads for 2020, just so you know. And Google has already limited political advertising, but it's still allowed. So keep in mind that this landscape is changing, but until it changes further, Google and Facebook are the primary advertising vehicles that nonprofits and political organizations spend their money on. And that's because they complete another coin, if you will, of the digital advertising world. One side of the coin is intent-based. So Google ads are so powerful because you pay to serve ads to people when they type something into a box. And that typing into a box gives you a really good picture of what they care about, and it's served to them immediately after they type into the box. So if I type in Margaret Brodkin into Google, and Margaret was running for office, and I ran an ad, promoting Margaret's candidacy, well, that's like really, really relevant to what the user just did. And it's kind of rare that digital advertising is able to capitalize on that strong of a user behavior, which is why it's called intent-based marketing and very powerful. Facebook, on the other hand, I have no idea what the person's doing at the time. They're probably just scrolling through their feed mindlessly. But what we do have is a ton of data on what they care about and the type of person they are. We can geo-target and limit it to people who like Beyonce's Facebook page and do all sorts of things like that to approximate the type of people we want to advertise to, but we don't know what they're doing in the moment. So those are the two platforms that are really powerful. I'm going to read Julie's comment here. Yeah, so Julie mentioned that she's gotten some really good results or decent results from Facebook ads with clear calls to action, which is super important. Combine that call to action with your value proposition and some sort of content that cuts through the noise of the internet, and you are probably looking at a successful ad. I'd love, Christy, if you wouldn't mind sharing what the not great results were or why you think that was, that'd be great. But here are some examples from Jim's ballot measure. Yes on G from Sacramento, and some of the ads we helped run, and some ads from Joe Biden with like clear, right? The clear call to action is condemn Trump. It couldn't be more simple. And targeting people who hate Trump, pretty easy to get them to click this button and take this action. I also want to flag for you that as you're exploring with like other reason that Google and Facebook are great is that you can literally accomplish results with $10 or $25. When you've got a big thing coming up and you can, assign that little budget, it is helpful to spend that kind of money to just give your post a boost or see what kind of traction you get from spending $20. Whereas like on a Spotify or a Hulu, Spotify's minimum is $250 and Hulu's minimum is $5,000. So they're more approachable platforms. So with Facebook and Google, another great thing that was a result of the Russian interference in 2016, one great thing as a result of that is that these platforms have had to introduce a lot of transparency, including being able to see every ad served ever in politics. So if you Google Facebook ad library, you'll see this page, and you can type in any page in the world. And if they've run political ads, you will find them here. Really, really educational to see what Joe Biden and Trump are doing. Also to see what AOC is doing, and to see what your colleagues and peers in the children's funding space are doing. There are some examples I included from the Children's Defense Fund, but you should just look up the organization you want to see what and learn about, and you'll find these ads. So here are just some examples from CDF with clear calls to action for donating to double their impact in one, and just a more simple every child deserves a chance, donate, ask. And I'm guessing here they were testing whether that match would increase donation rates. On the Google side of things, here's what a Google ad looks like. You all have probably seen this a million times, so I won't go over it, but I will say that the other thing that Google allows you to do is to buy YouTube and display ads, because Google has a huge network of publishers that hire Google to sell their inventory, so to speak. So if you go on CNN.com and you see these types of ads that are on the right-hand side, and there's these annoying banners that you might be using an ad blocker to hide, Google is a platform you can use to buy those ads, and it's much easier to buy them through Google than other platforms, and worth exploring for when you have a bigger budget and have some graphic imagery that you think will be really effective. So here's some examples of that from a anti-e-cigarette campaign. Okay, that's it for advertising. But plenty of time to discuss in the Q&A. One thing folks have potentially seen through the Black Lives Matter movement is the proliferation of one-click email tools. And I wanted to show you how to do it. So this will be quick and dirty how to do this. So here's an example from defund12.org. Every single one of these links opens up your email provider with a pre-filled email to send to these various city councils to defund the police. How do you do it? Pretty easy. You go to mail2link.me, and then you type your email. And for the purposes of this exercise, the email we typed out is literally to the left here. Just imagine your own subject line and content in this email. And then you click the copy code button at the bottom, and then it's going to spit out this thing that looks a little indecipherable on the left. This is some code. But then you take that code and you go to tinyurl.com and you paste it in, as I've done in this screenshot, and you click the Make a Tiny URL button. And then you send that to somebody, and they click it, and it opens up their email provider. This will almost always work, assuming they're have Gmail on their phone or Outlook as their default provider, or some email tool. Like if they literally have deleted all the email apps off their phone, then this won't work. But they're kind of pre-built into most phones and computers. So it will almost always work, and it's really powerful. And yeah, so it is very convenient and easy for you to produce. And then on the tiny URL side of things, you can actually track how many people click on your links and things like that too. So I wanted to share that with you all. Feel free to drop questions into the chat, but you can then, you can imagine that since you can make a custom ending to the URL, you could make one email for one decision body and another email link for a different decision body. And they can have similar, they can be similar URLs, but slightly different, and make it really easy for people to take the action you need to. And one quick tip on these is that you should totally CC your own email or organization in this, in the mail to link generator, so that you can see who's taking action, because that's one of the limits of it. And if you are ready to be more advanced than this and want to make it really easy for people to call or fax or tweet at their legislators, I encourage you to look up phone to action or new mode. Those are two tools you can Google that kind of take this idea of digital advocacy to the next level by introducing one-click calling functionality and faxing and things like that. Jim asked a very good question about how often electeds open these emails, and that's a really important consideration. Now with defund here, they clearly had one goal, which was to spam the hell out of these city councils, right? And get as many people as possible to inundate those inboxes. At some point, the city councils probably shut down their email system or, you know, took some other measure. So it is really important that you know or have some idea of how the targets you have in your advocacy campaigns respond and react to these types of campaigns. Because, you know, in worst case, you like piss off an ally that you needed, but more commonly, they just like don't actually care about the emails they receive because they're not great elected officials or something to that effect. So it is really important that you have a good understanding of whether it's worth it to run this kind of campaign, to know if they'll read it. But generally speaking, this type of email is more well received than one from New Mode or Phone to Action, because they are like, they're actually sent from the person's email provider. Like this link just opens up my Gmail, and then I have to hit send to email my electeds. Versus on a New Mode or Phone to Action, it's sent through like some technical wizardry to make it kind of seem like it comes from me, but a legislator knows that it's a batch email if they are tech savvy. So hopefully that addressed your question, Jim. It's kind of it's a legislator by legislator kind of thing. And the other one, Kadana, was New Mode, new/mode. Both of them have tweet, email, and call tools that are expensive but powerful. Okay, that's mail to links. Well, how do you distribute them, and what should you do with them? One of the things you've probably seen is that people are putting these all over Instagram and doing a lot of digital advocacy through Instagram. So one great tool towards that end is Linktree. Maybe you've already seen it, and this screen on the right is really familiar to you, but it's free. Just Google Linktree, or wait for the resources page at the end, and you can build a tree of links that you can direct your Instagram followers towards. So instead of always replacing the link in your bio, you don't have to do that anymore. You just have one link tree, and you're constantly updating that link tree with your latest ask. And now people are using Linktree just as they're not even like connecting it to Instagram. It was a product built for Instagram because of the annoyance of always updating the link in your bio. And for those who don't know, the reason this is a thing is because Instagram does not feature clickable links in any of their content. But they do in a person's bio. But now, in this age of COVID and Black Lives Matter, people are using Linktree simply to circulate helpful links to people, like outside of the Instagram ecosystem. And you can see why. There are like literally 6 things here, and if these are the 6 things you care about at the time, you can easily share this with people, and they know, okay, these are the 6 things they care about. And you can number them, you can label them, whatever you want. Thank you, Sarah, for your support with facts. Jim, that does sound like a bit of a technical challenge in terms of adding the live-in district line with 1,200 members and figuring out which ones do. But we can talk about it a bit more at the end. Another free tool that is a more advanced version of Linktree is called Carrd, C-A-R-R-D. This is like Squarespace for Instagram links, because it will take you like, if you know how to use Squarespace or a Wix, or honestly, if you can navigate Constant Contact or MailChimp, you can navigate Carrd, and you could be making a free website for yourself in like 15 to 30 minutes. And they have a bunch of pre-built templates. And one that you may have seen that's gone super, super viral is this one on the right for Black Lives Matter, with this like simple list of buttons and some text on top. So the proliferation of free tools to distribute content and ask people to do things is greater than ever. And Card is a really good new one if you're particularly interested in like the Instagram world of distributing link collection. Okay, how do you make your Instagram images pop really nicely? I highly recommend Canva. I'm sure some of the folks on this call have used it. And before I was preparing for this training, I had to and thought I knew all there was. But they've recently like super stepped up their game in terms of the free templates they make available to you across all the spectrum of things you could ever want to design. From Instagram posts to flyers to a bunch of COVID related stuff. And you just click on one of these squares and then change the text and use it for your organization. And it's free and it's super easy. And I just really encourage folks to use Canva to that. Just as a, for instance, like when Margaret first asked me to do this training, I built this custom in Canva. I did not use a template. And that was a mistake because I could have just found one of these templates and changed the words and spent less time. But you know, if you want to customize and go deep, you absolutely can with Canva. But you also can save yourself a ton of time and just change the words on the template. Last but not least, there's obviously no image of human beings in this graphic. It probably would have benefited from one because we all respond to human beings better than we do to graphics and things like that. So I want to just plug two really strong stock photo resources that you can use without like citing the photographer or anything like that. Unsplash and Pixabay. Super great. Like if you search Black Lives Matter on Unsplash right now, there's some really awesome photography on there. Okay, so here are the resources I just mentioned. Since Margaret mentioned she's going to share all these slides, I won't stay on the screen. And that's it. So just to kind of recap, you need to assign, I just went through a lot of different things, right? I tried to give you some quick wins that you could implement. There is so much to this work, and it's very hard to stay focused, even as someone who's been doing this for the last decade. And I just implore you to identify one or two goals that you can really organize behind and what realistically you and your team have the capacity to commit to doing a good job via digital, whether that is these graphics or it is the mail to links or a card website or some Facebook ads or managing an Action Network account. There's a lot to it. And prioritizing is really, really key. What kind of questions do we have? And as folks think through their questions, I will kick it back to Margaret.
Well, I was hoping you could tell them about the campaign we are starting, that we're aiming to do Facebook ads for children's advocates in the places where we're working with coalitions that are interested in getting more money in their local budgets for kids or starting to collect names for a ballot measure. And if you write me, and we can talk about it on the phone, we can put you on the, involve you in this campaign. So for instance, we're working with a group in San Joaquin County. If they sign on and they're looking at putting a measure on the ballot to get money for kids through cannabis. And if they sign on to this campaign, it's not going to cost you anything. We will do Facebook ads in San Joaquin County to help them develop their list of people who are interested in children's issues. Is that an accurate explanation, Salim?
Beautifully accurate, indeed. Yeah. And then those folks can be asked to give money, to volunteer, to contact their elected officials, whatever you need them to do.
Right. So as I said at the beginning of this, I'm sort of curious. I have to say, being 76 years old, not understanding about half of what you said. I don't know if other people are in that position, but if you call me or email me, we can start a conversation about getting help, some additional help from Salim. It is a small part of my grant from the California Endowment to pay for people to provide technical assistance to people who are trying to get more local dollars for kids in either their city or their county.
Yeah, feel free to email me, salim@50p1.com, SALIM. I'll type it in the chat too. You know, if you have like just a super quick question, want to gut check something, I'm very, very happy to just, you know, respond to those requests and give you my best guidance. And obviously 50+1 is a full service consulting firm. We do a bunch of work. We are quite busy with the November elections coming down the pike. But if there's a potential partnership opportunity, we're always eager to explore those if you are looking for a more holistic wraparound digital service. But I very much commit to being responsive to the folks on this call and helping you, if I can, with whatever your digital questions may be.
Right. So if you want more than just a quick and dirty question and you want to spend some time either with Salim or with Nicole, who is the head of 50+1 and helps people strategize about campaigns, we have a few resources in our budget to give you time to do that. So, and we also have our fiscal person on the call, and he helps people analyze their local budgets. So the first contact for that would be through me, Margaret, at fundingthenextgeneration.org. Quick and dirty questions for Salim. You go directly to Salim, and he is happy to give you the time.
I'm also happy to talk through any, you know, I often find that the Q&A in a normal real life training, the Q&A is by far the best part because everyone's questions kind of create a bunch of cohesion around what matters to organizations. And there's so much similarity and challenge that we all face when trying to break through online. I would love to see more Q&A. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Tobias, for dropping in a question.
Yeah.
Yes, there are many ways that people are going to canvass or do civic engagement digitally. I will throw this interesting nugget out to you all. The folks, there was a huge coalition of labor and other groups that were trying to do a bunch of on-the-ground organizing before Joe Biden became the presumptive nominee. It's called Organizing Together 2020, and they had a bunch of field staff. And they got hit by COVID, and their whole program had to be changed dramatically. There were two really interesting nuggets from reading some of their postmortems. The first is that they hired an ice cream truck to drive down neighborhoods, and would then, like, that was one way to get people outside of their house, was with an ice cream truck, which we like already knew, but in the age of COVID, there are a few things that will get people out of their homes, and ice cream, I think, continues to be one. The other is that they texted people. They did send canvassers, and the canvasser would probably stand like 15 feet from the door, and the canvasser would text that specific voter, which, you know, requires having that person's phone number and canvassing just the doors of people you have cell phones for. But they literally texted that voter and said, hey, do you want to have a socially distanced conversation from 15 feet away? And I think a surprising number of people said yes, because we are all starved for human interaction right now. Now, that's a huge thing to consider in, you know, with rulings from counties and governors flying left and right. And I'm not encouraging you to do that. But obviously, thinking outside the box is key right now. And at the very least, what we can do is canvass people via calling them and texting them. And there is a huge new body of work kind of started since 2015 called vote tripling, which is an electoral tactic that is more and more being implemented in the C3 nonprofit space, where once you have somebody who supports you, the next logical thing to do is to get them to bring 3 friends to support you too. And in the electoral space, they call it vote tripling. But in the C3 space, you can call whatever you want, triple your impact. I actually implemented this with the Latino Community Foundation for census outreach. It's like, okay, you've committed to take the census. Now, please ask 3 friends to take it too. So there are creative ways to tackle the fact that one of the things we're so good at as progressives in this space, we can no longer do with door-to-door canvassing. Any other questions? If anybody has, like, you know, a true challenge at their organization they want to have me weigh in on in the next 12 minutes, I'm happy to do that. Here's a question from Ashley. Great question about how to avoid getting your petition lost. So that petition I shared from the Breathe Act with the 5,000 signatures, we actually worked on that at 50+1. And there were a couple key things to consider that led to that big number of 5,500 signers. The first is that a bunch of celebrities tweeted out, like a lot of celebrities, like Amy Schumer and other people. And that took a lot of work and pre-existing relationships to have those celebrity connections. But there's still a lesson for those of us who don't know Amy Schumer, which is to identify the micro-influencers in your community. Who are the people who have 2,000 plus Twitter, or Facebook, or Instagram followers in your network that you've identified that can help promote this in a real way? So that's one thing, influencers and kind of generating organic traction that way. Another is paid advertising, which because of the influencer thing, we didn't have to do. But with paid advertising, you can be sure that people are seeing your content. And the second challenge is getting them to take action on it, which comes back to just having the clearest value proposition and call to action possible. And Jim, maybe you have some insights you want to share from the petition you ran for SAC Kids First. But in terms of getting lost in the noise of the internet, it's again going back to content and distribution and putting equal effort into who is going to help me promote this and how and what channels are going to break through, and is this content actually worthwhile to the world? Will it make people laugh, cry, smile, or educate them in some way? And right now there's a lot of education all of us have to do around COVID and how budgets are getting shifted. So I would encourage you to lean into that education element of it. And like, did you know this, like the city council is literally voting on this next week, and we have the power to change how they vote for the better.
Just to go back to sort of the basics of funding the next generation, I did the major work to get San Francisco to pass a Children and Youth Fund. And that actually happened in 1991, was the first one in the state. The second one in the country. It's brought millions and millions of dollars into children and youth services. It's been reauthorized twice. They gave me a true believer in two things. One, children's people can use the ballot. And even now in this COVID world, it's time to start thinking about 2022 and using some of these techniques to build a list that will put you and the coalition you work with in a position to mount a strong ballot measure. But meantime, your city council and your board of supervisors is voting, and they will probably be voting continuously because no one knows how much money they're going to have. So they approve a budget, and then a couple months later they're going to approve it again. There's going to be federal money, and then there's going to be not money. So it's going to be more of an ongoing process, your county and city local budget process. And you know, we just worked with a group in San Diego, and they started out asking for $5 million. Then the county said, well, we'll give the $5 million if the city puts in $5 million. Then they got $10 million. And then people got so jazzed about how important childcare was, that's what they were asking for money for, that somebody who is running for office said, okay, I'm going to mount a campaign to get $25 million into the city budget. It's the first local dollars ever put into childcare. People did it during COVID, sort of capitalizing on the fact that people understand it. And these are techniques that, you know, that's why we want Salim to be, Salim is a good partner for us, and 50+1 is, because we want people to be successful. My fantasy in life is that places all over the state, all the cities and counties, have local dedicated funding streams for kids like we were able to do in San Francisco, that has transformed our ability to provide services.
+1 to everything Margaret just said. Very eloquent and very true. And I encourage you, if you're thinking about just to kind of put a fine point on what she said, if you have a ballot measure you're considering in 2022, you can use these moments that are happening now to build for that, right? Because building that list requires what Jim put in the chat, which is urgency. So you can use these urgent moments to build towards your long-term goals, even 2 years from now. And I highly encourage you to do it. Sarah Michael asked a very good question from Youth Forward about the validity of an ad when you have 100 or 1,000 followers on social media. And I have to agree with you. We haven't talked very much at all about digital organizing, which is a whole nother world where you kind of combine the traditional boot leather organizing work with digital tactics, which is a lot of what I do these days. It's very time intensive. But one thing your question kind of evokes, Sarah Michael, is that community and building real, legitimate, tangible community makes all the difference. So if you have people on the ground holding, or, in Zoom, holding virtual meetings and doing this kind of work, and then you layer on top of that your petition and your social media and your outreach, it all builds. Because now Margaret now has 30 plus people who've been on this webinar who've listened to us talk, and it's the perfect time to give them something powerful to do, which is what what you kind of did by asking if you wanted to join the Funding the Next Generation statewide advertising campaign she talked about. So layering your communication with the growing your list and hosting events and putting things out on social is only going to help you in terms of building a truly engaged, real community of humans who know you and care about what you have to say and will do what you ask. So it's not so much about do I have 100 or 1,000 followers, though that makes a difference. It's more so about are you quote unquote touching people in a way that they will remember and is relevant to them.
And by the way, we would love to hear any other information you would like Funding the Next Generation. We want to help people put measures on the ballot. We want to help people be good budget advocates. Please let us know what kind of information would be helpful. Maybe the kind of digital organizing that Salim's just been talking about. Understanding what a local budget is, understanding your county budget, understanding your city budget, understanding the techniques you can use to influence boards of supervisors and city councils, what kind of coalitions are making sense. And we're finding that we have actually new kinds of coalitions forming. And for instance, the San Diego people were deeply into coalitions with the hospital association because they had so many workers that needed childcare. So is this a time to think creatively about who your partners in this work can be? Salim, any final words?
Well, I encourage you to reach out to me, or if you don't need me, but just need to spend time to think through how you're going to tackle the digital challenge in front of all of us in 2020 and beyond. I just really encourage you to do it and to prioritize the capacity, because it will pay off. It sounds really daunting at the upfront, but if you do what Margaret says and you build that list of people working towards a ballot measure or just some organizational goal you have in 2022, and you take the time now to take advantage of those moments of city council meetings of outrage and confusion, and you educate people and you provide value, you will build a list of people who will stick with you, who will raise you money, et cetera, et cetera. So I just encourage you to do it and see what results you get. And the last thing I didn't say that I should have said in this presentation is that data is king here. And that's the best thing about digital, is that you almost always immediately get back true raw metrics on what's working and what isn't. And I encourage you to read that data and use that as your North Star for whether or not people are responding. Whether that data is, are people clicking on my email or just the likes and comments you're receiving from Facebook? Those are the signals that will point you towards a successful digital program.
So unless anybody else has any comments for the chat or any questions, we will close this session, and thank you so much for participating. And remember, I love to hear from people. I love to talk to people about this. No matter what level of seriousness or capacity you have now, please reach out. And you can reach out to Salim too. And we're contemplating what we need to do next to empower local coalitions all over the state to use their capacity and build their power now, particularly for getting more money for kids. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Great to meet folks via chat. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.
I figured out how to save the chat.
Awesome. Well, Margaret, I have to jump into another meeting, but this has been very fun.
Yes, it was fabulous. And I'm going to post a private recording and ask you to edit out the first part so we can send it to people.
Sounds
okay.
Good.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.